What's going on, guys? Chris here with a review of Formula 1 2015, and yes, there is certainly a mixed bag when it comes to talking about this game. So what I'm going to do is start off talking about the things that I do like and then move on to the things that I don't like. And so we'll begin with the visuals, and there's no denying that this is a great game to look at. I mean, it's not like MotoGP 15 where the graphics are fine but are not great compared to other next gen titles. This really is a very pretty game, especially the night races. You've got Bahrain, Singapore, Abu Dhabi, and when it rains as well. I think it looks absolutely fantastic. I like how detailed the rain is as well. I mean, right down to the splash against the ground or against the cars. And the detailing of the mechanics when you're in the garage, their animations are all very good as well. And we know that Codemasters have used a new engine for this game and it's worked wonders for them. Which leads me on to the audio, which is such an important feature in any racing game. And again, I have to say Codemasters have done a very good job. There's distinction between the four different engine manufacturers, and I like the other noises that you have when you're driving the car as well. You've got the tyre squeal when you lock a wheel. The curbs sound really good in this game. The floor scraping along the ground at high speed as well. They've really collected all the sounds that a Formula 1 car makes and involved them in the game, which is really awesome. I have to say I also really like the fact that when you're in completely the wrong gear, it sounds like you're in completely the wrong gear. It's not just on really low revs. So, I mean, if you're in 8th gear doing 70 miles an hour, then, the engine sounds ill almost. The engine really struggles to give you power, like it should do. And another thing I really like about this game is the fact that you can talk to your engineer. It's something I've dreamed about since I played WRC on the PS1 when I was like 5 years old. And I mean, it actually works as well. I mean, it provides really useful information. He gives specific advice as well. Tell you which corners you need to pick up the pace on, and he'll give you advice for the start just before the race as well. And that's also track and grid position specific. So we'll give you different advice to starting 5th at Silverstone to if you were starting 15th at Spa. Completely opposing corners and grid positions that require you to drive very differently. And you really take on board his information. It does immerse you in the race and the experience of a Formula 1 driver. Especially when you consider that you're having to do all the fuel mixes, the brake bias, tyre strategy. And yeah, we've seen all this in Codemasters F1 games before, but it adds a new element to it. Especially now that we've got the new option, which is to add or lose downforce mid-race as well. So that's a really cool feature. And the handling model is a big step up. Codemasters have gone a little bit further down the simulation route, I feel, as opposed to Simcade. And it's worked out really well. I mean, it's a very fun model that they've come out with. You can throw the car around quite a bit, get a bit kick of oversteer in the lower gears, but also unsettle the rear in the quick corners as well, like we've been seeing with this new generation of cars. Again, it's the detailing that I really like. I mean, since we've got these new 8-speed gearboxes, there's been this trend of mid-corner downshifts to get that good kick out of a corner. But it can really unsettle the rear because you're sending power to the rear wheels in the middle of the corner. And that's reflected in the game too, and you can really feel the difference between high speed and low speed corners, even with the pad. I mean, it still feels like there's good resistance in the steering wheel at high speed compared to low speed. I have to say I do quite like the TV presentation mentality that Codemasters have brought into F1 2015. Yes, I do skip the podium celebrations and grid order because it doesn't matter to me, and I'm sure it doesn't matter to a lot of people, but I really enjoy being on the grid before the start of a race and having the TV crews there with my engineers. I also really like being able to watch the TV feed from the garage. I think that's a really great way to pick up a few tips from the AI. I mean, you can see what they're doing differently, and then you can go out and try it. And it's great that they finally have the real TV cameras on replay as well at last. I mean, it's something that we've wanted for a while, and it looks much better than the cinematics they used to use. And the fact that you can spectate other drivers for the replays as well is fantastic. I really enjoy that feature. And well, that actually brings me quite smoothly to crashes. Everybody on the internet loves to see good crashes in a racing game, and the damage in this game is a big improvement on what they previously had. I mean, the front wing breaks up into so many more pieces, whereas before you just had kind of light damage on one side, then heavy damage on both sides, and then no front wing at all. This is a big step up, but it does still need work. I mean, light contact still doesn't really do much. Like if you go into the back of someone, you clip their rear tire or something, it doesn't really give you damage, it doesn't give them damage, and it'd be nice to see kind of just some elements flicking off the front wing or something from light contact. So that's everything I like about the game. And before I move on to what I don't like about the game, I just want to remind you of a few facts. I mean, this is not me making excuses for Codemasters, this is just something to bear in mind. Mana came into the game later than every other team because we didn't know they were going to be on the grid until very late in the day. So they will have shifted a lot of focus into coding a whole new car, animating the two drivers, etc, etc. Then you have the fact that Germany was taken off the calendar just before the start of the season too, so Codemasters will have been coding Nürburgring for it to not even be in the game. And when you look at the cars now compared to them at the start of the season, a lot of them are very, very different. A lot of teams have changed the nose designs, like McLaren and Toro Rosso. So Codemasters will be working on that, releasing the DLC like they said they would, updating the cars as the season progresses. But then you have teams like Force India who have introduced an entirely new car halfway through the season. And now we've got this whole thing of manual starts, which will be introduced after the summer break as well. So there's a lot going on in the background to consider here, but anyway, the things that I don't like and need work in F1 2015. We'll start off with some glitches. Myself and my Beckett's blog colleagues have been playing this game extensively and have come across a few bugs and glitches. Probably the worst one being that if you use a flashback in the pit lane because you hit the wall on the pit exit or something, for whatever reason, it will spawn you on the track and facing the wrong way. When you get a puncture as well, the grass and sometimes bits of the front wing can glitch through the tyre. The polystyrene boards on the runoff area at the first chicane at Monza, for example, you can just go straight through them. It's as if they're not even there at all. And the other one, which I think is quite important, is the cockpit cam view. For some reason, is really shaky. And it's not like they're trying to recreate the driver's vision, because it's not like the helmet cam that you get in project cars. It even still does this shaking thing in the garage. So they need working on. And I will admit, yes, some of those may be a bit picky, but I'm paying 50 quid for a video game and I expect it to work properly. And you also do have to wonder how they missed that. I mean, they had people testing the game. Did no one use a flashback in the pit lane or ever get a puncture? I mean, there was another one that I had, which was really odd. I was doing a 25% distance online race, had a strategy set out, and my engineer changed the strategy mid-race and didn't tell me, which I thought was very odd. And I also have a serious issue with the monitor in your garage, in that it doesn't show you weather for the rest of the weekend. I mean, what's that all about? It's been in every other Codemasters F1 game, so why isn't it in this one? Did they just forget to put it in or something? I mean, it can have massive repercussions as well. I mean, you can have a dry qualifying and a wet race, and suddenly your setup is completely wrong for the race, and the player just ends up getting frustrated because they're spinning out all the time, or they're just being monstered by the AI because they have the wrong setup. The objective system as well, I really don't like. It's never really worked in the other F1 games, and it's the same in this one. It's totally unrealistic. Red Bull honestly expected me to get a podium finish in Mexico. I mean, the other ones in the championship season mode, where you can get a podium one race and suddenly the next race they'll expect you to win, even if the track is completely different and doesn't suit your car's abilities or your driving at all. And that actually leads me on quite nicely to the championship season mode in general, which, let's be honest, it should be a career mode. I've always enjoyed playing as myself, trying to get up through the ranks from a backmarker team up to the midfield to a top tier team, winning races and winning championship, the contract negotiations in between as well that came with it, and well, all of that's gone. And Codemasters said that they never got it up to the standard that they wanted. But what were they planning for this that was so different from what they've used since 2010? I feel like in general, there is a shortage of game modes in this game. I mean, you've got the standard championship mode, quick race, time trial, and then the only real kind of extra content is pro season mode, which in all honesty, unless you're really good at racing games, you'll play once, get frustrated with it, and then never go on it again. And the fact that they've included the 2014 cars as well, I mean, to me that just feels like filler content to make the game, seem worthy of the money you're spending on it. I mean, you look at Formula 1 2012, you had Champions Mode, Scenario Mode, Season Challenge, and then F1 2013 you had the Classic content as well. And compared to that, 2015 just feels empty, especially when you compare it to MotoGP 15, which has all the bikes from all three classes, plus the classic content like the 500cc bikes as well. Yes, I know there is an issue with including GP2 and GP3 in a Formula 1 game because they're independent series, but you see my point of how this game is lacking in content and different options for players to use. Another thing that's really lacking in this game is the weather system. Codemasters pioneered the most complicated and frankly best weather system in a video game when they brought out F1 2010, and since then it hasn't really moved forward, and because of that they've fallen behind the likes of Slightly Mad Studios and Project Cars, where not only do they have a similarly dynamic system, but you can pick a day in the year and it will recreate the weather from that day. That's the next step in the development of the weather system, and Codemasters haven't taken advantage of it. And you have to notice that you can get quite unrealistic weather, like rain in Bahrain. I mean, 11 races and it's only rained once. It doesn't take into account the time of year, the climate. So when they have the race in Texas, it's pretty hot. Yet the game might decide that there's going to be a thunderstorm. Now sure, that's a fun thing to try out in a quick race when you can decide the weather, but in the championship mode, where its goal is to recreate the year in Formula 1 as accurately as possible, you want the weather to be realistic to where you are and what time of year it is. Which brings me to the AI, which has had complaints every year and in every racing game. And what I'll say is that they're quite aggressive, but not in a bad way. It's not like when Project Cars first came out that they would literally just try to drive straight through you. But there's a good amount of aggressiveness, and yes, they really do race you, and they'll also make attempts to avoid collisions if you get into a corner a bit too hot. But the AI have no concept of an outlap, which is one of the most rage-inducing issues in a racing game, because you're going slowly trying to warm up your tyres and your brakes, and there's AI trying to overtake you, and you'll end up getting a lot of penalties because you're impeding, because they don't actually overtake you, they just kind of sit behind you. And then you've got the one where they're on an outlap, you're on a hot lap, and then they try and pass you and completely bugger up a qualifying lap. And a lot of people have been complaining that the AI are massively overpowered and will easily sail past you down the straight. And I've experienced this where they go down a straight, but then they're really early on the brakes for the next corner and you end up just smashing into them. But then I've also experienced the complete opposite of that, where I drove straight past two Ferraris and a Mercedes in a Williams. Not even on a long straight, it was on the pit straight at Silverstone. 3 cars in that tiny bit of straight. And this lack of consistency in the AI means that you'll quite often end up making a bit of contact, which means you stack up the penalties, which, while we're talking about it, needs a bit of work as well. I mean, it has the same issue as Project Cars, in that the game's idea of corner cutting is ridiculous. According to the copy that I got, hitting the apex at Copse Corner at Silverstone was exceeding the track limit. And when the game keeps giving you 2 or 3 second penalties for stuff like that, that's the kind of thing that makes me want to turn off my PlayStation. So now we have to talk about the elephant in the room, the game's biggest problem, the online multiplayer. And the worst thing about that is what can you say about it? It doesn't work, pure and simple. Anyone who's seen our F1 2015 video so far will have known that we've all ended up seeing something completely different on our screens to each other. And how are you supposed to play a game when you're all seeing something different? You can't. But the stupid thing is, for the brief amount of time it does work, it's really fun. But then you'll get to the next race and oh dear, we're out of sync again. And we never found out why it did it. It wasn't circuit specific, it wasn't because of who was hosting the lobby. We honestly couldn't find a reason for it. And that needs to be fixed pronto. It's been over a week since the game's release, and honestly I would have expected something by now. It is the worst possible issue you can have with a game that has a strong online community, especially when there's very little escape in the single player mode as well. But it really does make me think, how the heck in all of the testing and development of this game did they miss that out? Did no one notice how their end result was completely different to what it was when they crossed the finish line? So seriously, Codemasters, hurry up and get that sorted. So if I were to sum up F1 2015, I would say that it's an immensely fun game when it works. When it doesn't work, it is infuriating to the point of why bother playing this game when I'm having to take the risk of whether or not the game's going to function properly every time I start a race. So my advice would be to wait until Codemasters sends out the patches, the DLCs, the update to the servers, etc., and then buy it. Don't spend £45 on a broken video game. So I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Be sure to check out our other videos as well, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.